You are now live.
Okay, and I got it. Senator Sorokin, can you hit got it behind you? And get rid of the white. Okay, Faith, I just have two views of the room, up and down. Is that what it should be? Since
That's
staff was,
correct.
okay. Since staff was playing with the camera yesterday and we had some very strange camera angles in here, like 8 pictures. Okay, we are going to start on 738. And this is miscellaneous tax. And we're going to start with, I guess, Rebecca Samaroff is going to do the introduction. Okay. And I'm assuming this is posted, so I will go find it.
Yeah, thank you. Rebecca Samaroff, Deputy Commissioner of the Department of Taxes. And I'll be using Abby's handy section by section, which I did see posted on the committee page, just to do a walkthrough. So yeah, this year's miscellaneous tax bill is a purely technical bill so far.
I was going to say, it's even more technical than most.
Yeah, right. Yeah, so all just proposals to ease or clarify tax administration. There are 2 additions from the Treasurer's Office and from Fish and Wildlife in there, but we have other witnesses to speak to those. And I thought I could just do just kind of like a high-level walkthrough of these technical proposals, like kind of the what and the why, and then see if there are any further questions from there while we're here. And then I know there's a plan to dive a little deeper into the enhanced life estate.
I think that was the one thing, I think they went through when I wasn't on the committee, and it seemed to be the one we were struggling with as a new concept. So.
Yeah, so I know Eric's prepared a refresher on what enhanced life estates are. So maybe we can defer discussion on that one until after his refresher presentation, because I think that'll benefit us all.
That sounds fine.
Yeah, but that's that first.
You know what you're talking about.
Right, right. So that enhanced life estates is the first sections 1 through 3. So we'll chat about those soon. The next sections 4 and 5. This is a technical correction to our corporate income statutes. There was a federal due date change in 2017 that didn't really make its way into all the places in our statute where we needed it. So this is a technical correction to conform the timing of the assessment of penalties for failure to make an estimated payment to that new due date.
Okay, I had a vague recollection of having done something like that. Can I assume that it was in one of the other sections of the statute we may have done it? I thought I remembered having done something similar like last year.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it was last year, but I'm sure that we needed to make the conforming technical corrections to this federal due date change somewhat recently. I think this was before my time in this role, and then this is kind of catching the stragglers.
But we're just catching up, all right.
Right. So if there's no questions there, the next section 6 and 7, this is our annual link up to the federal tax code. Your committee may remember that last year was a little more dynamic than usual because we had that massive retroactive change to the federal tax code that we were all debating whether or not to conform to or not. Luckily, we're not seeing anything like that this year, kind of smooth sailing. Yeah, so this is familiar language.
And this is, we are hooking up retroactively to December 31st, 2021. I know we were trying to last year do proactively or in advance because we didn't want perhaps to hook up to all the federal changes last year. We're now back to the way it's been forever. Okay.
Sure. Right.
And the House didn't make any changes to this, and they were the driving force last year with changing it. All right.
Right. So the next sections 8 through 11, this is a change for the income tax return checkoff box for the Vermont Children's Trust Fund. This wasn't offered by the department, but we see no problems with it. And I know that we have some testimony coming from the Treasurer's Office to explain this one. So I'll leave that one for them. This next one, sections 12 through 13, it looks like a bit of a doozy in terms of page length, but this is model language from the Multi-State Tax Commission that basically allows states to collect revenue that's already owed to them after a large federal partner or a large partnership goes through a federal audit. To clarify, this isn't anything about the state doing more audits or changing the way that we do audit. It's just helps the taxpayer navigate a situation where they need to come to the state after a change in their taxable income from a federal audit and file an amended return and pay us. This change only affects very large partnerships, over 100 partners, who would be subject to a federal audit adjustment. And can go into more detail here if folks are interested.
Basically, if you have a federal audit, they change anything, then you have to refile making those changes in your state audit or your state filing. And if you owe more taxes due to those federal judgments, then you have to pay them.
Correct. Yeah. And some background here is that in 2015, Congress passed a law allowing the IRS to, for the first time, conduct partnership level audits and to assess the partnership itself, if necessary, as part of their new centralized partnership audit regime. So, before they would have to track audits down through each partner in these, kind of tortuous multi-tier partnerships, but now they kind of have a one-stop shop for doing their audit where they can audit at the partnership level. The challenge for states is that we need a way to handle an audit that's happened at the partnership level because
we're still getting it through individual income tax returns.
Exactly.
So this would be the individual members of the partnership that would have to file a tax return, or?
Well, this allows now for Vermont to receive an adjustment to our state taxes at the partnership level as well, and that's kind of why it's very wordy. It's great that the MTC gave us model language for this. Like, as a small state, it's handy for a taxpayer not to learn specific rules for a million different jurisdictions. So
that's the kind of thing that triggers a federal takeover.
Yeah. Right. So they've laid it all out with many specific rules.
Okay.
Great. Awesome. The next section, section 14, this is related to taxation of land underlying a solar plant or an energy storage facility. This might feel familiar to folks because the miscellaneous energy bill last year came through this committee. And this is just a technical correction as well. That miscellaneous energy bill included language to change the way that land is valued when it's underlying certain renewable energy plants. But unfortunately, the statutory reference in that change was narrowly just applying to education property tax when the intent was for it to apply to the whole tax system. So now we're left in kind of this weird situation where a municipal lister or assessor would have to value the land underlying, like a solar array, let's say, one way for the education tax and a different way for the municipal tax. And that's not great for anybody. So this is just correcting that statutory reference to make sure the change applies to both education and municipal tax.
Okay.
Great. Okay. And then the last sections, 15 and 16, are relate to fishing, hunting, and trapping licenses. And I believe we'll have Commissioner Herrick here to talk about that.
Okay. And that's fine. We do have Commissioner Herrick at the end. Okay. Committee, any questions at this point? No questions. All right.
Love it.
Right? We did, yes, Abby walked us through this and we got really hung up on the questions on enhanced life estates and property transfer tax, and it became pretty obvious we needed Life Estate 101. So we're gonna get that this afternoon, plus the other witnesses. I believe Christine Hallquist has some things that she wants on. This isn't the one where I thought the treasurer wanted some.
Yeah, they do on the trust, children's trust.
Yeah, but I thought there was another one where she wanted an advisory
Well,
committee
there's Ashley. So
expanded. So Ashlyn, you are our next witness, so welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good afternoon, committee. For the record, my name is Ashlyn Doyon, and I'm here on behalf of the Treasurer's Office. I have.
You get a little closer to your mic. We're getting some kind of echoing or.
Sure, can you hear me better now?
Little bit.
Okay, I will speak loudly, and hopefully it will be okay. So I have 2 items from the Treasurer's Office to speak with you about today. The first is the Children's Trust Foundation tax checkoff. And this language is sections 8, 9, 10, and 11 of your bill. And the Treasurer's Office is involved in this language request because in 2020, March, right before we all went home as part of the COVID emergency response, we had worked with the tax department, with DCF, with the Children's Trust Foundation themselves, with JFO to sort out this language so that the Children's Trust Foundation could receive the approximately $60,000 annually that they get through the Vermont State Income Tax Checkoff directly from the tax department instead of by way of DCF. The purpose of that is to just streamline the process and ensure that they receive those funds at a predictable date each year. And so that is all that this language does. The purpose of the money, the entity that receives the money, does the grants, all of the reporting requirements, none of that is changing. It is simply the mechanism by which the Children's Trust Foundation receives the money.
Okay.
could I ask? Ashley, is there any significance to it changing from the trust fund to the trust foundation? Is that a legal shift or what?
So in 2009, the Children's Trust Foundation began managing the money on the part of the Children's Trust Fund. They also raise money on behalf of the fund. And I think that was about $225,000 in 2022. However, the approximately $60,000 that comes from the tax checkoff, 100% of those dollars will go directly to the fund. I'm not sure if there are any administrative fees levied on other monies that the foundation raises on behalf of the fund. But as far as the state dollars that come through the tax checkoff, it's a 100%. And so that language change is just to reflect what happens, but you will see changes from fund to foundation in the language, and that is just to reflect the current process that's been in place since 2009.
Well, but this repeals the existence of the fund and puts it in as a foundation. So
Senator, that fund that it is repealing is the fund that DCF currently administers. That fund is being closed out, and now there's no need for a fund because the money is going to come directly from the tax department with the checkoff to the foundation. So there's two, it's confusing because there are 2 funds at play, but you are correct. The current State of Vermont accounting fund is going to be closed out at the end of the year.
Okay, so right now you check off the box. The money goes to the fund that is in DCF. It then has to get transferred to the foundation, which has been managing this trust fund. And can I assume maybe other states have trust funds that the
Every
foundation
state has a trust fund.
has funds,
Yes.
and the foundation manages those funds. So this just closes out the state fund, and the money and the checkup box will now go directly to the foundation without having to make that little dog leg through DCF, which I assume will save DCF some time. Is that?
Yes, that is correct. It will save DCF time, and the tax department has an electronic process that they've told us is not onerous that they can use to do this. So, yes.
Okay. Other questions on this one? Okay, do you have another? You said you had two.
I do, yes. So the second point is a request from the treasurer that does not currently exist in your bill, but that we think is a very easy add. And this has to do with the Local Investment Advisory Committee, also known as 10% in Vermont. The Local Investment Advisory Committee, which we refer to as the LIAC, began in 2014. And the idea is that up to 10% of Vermont's average daily cash balance can be invested in local projects rather than placed in an out-of-state account or a financial institution to generate that interest. Instead, can come from local financing and serve a dual purpose. So far, this committee has loaned almost $40 million. And it currently, the request that we have is to add 3 more committee members to the current membership. We propose to add a member from the Vermont Bankers Association, a member from the Association of Vermont Credit Unions, and a representative from ACCD. The reason for this is to gain sort of diversity in perspective and expertise, and also to help generate a broader network from which proposals for LIAC financing can be drawn from. In the past several years, we've had difficulty employing this financing for a couple of reasons. One is, the market conditions. The treasurer, as a fiduciary of state dollars, is required to obtain a certain interest rate on these funds. And many of the projects or entities that would come to us with financing proposals need a better interest rate than what we can offer. The other is, changing staff capacity in the treasurer's office. However, at the last meeting of the LIAC, the committee requested that the treasurer complete a market condition analysis so that going forward, we can begin to deploy more financing. And we think that including more diverse representation on the committee will assist with that effort as well.
Right now, you have VITA, VSAC, and VHFA, right? The big three.
We also have a representative from the Bond Bank and a representative from Efficiency Vermont.
Okay. So this would add the financial institutions, banks and credit unions, and the Agency of Commerce and Community Development. Okay.
Correct.
Senator Pearson.
So I hear you saying you want more diversity, but then you've added more bankers. So what, that doesn't seem like a real spreading of the minds here. So could you just help me understand that a little more?
Sure. So one of the things that we consistently hear from folks that are coming to us with financing proposals is that the rate that we have to offer, they can get a better rate from their bank or their financial institution, and or the bank or the financial institution can serve them in a way that we cannot. And so the purpose of LIAC funds is not to be competitive with other financial institutions in the state. It's to provide financing for projects or to entities who couldn't otherwise receive financing from these institutions. And so the hope is that by partnering more deeply with the folks who the people that we would like to most work with seem to be going to, we can be better service providers. And the addition of the Agency of Commerce and Community Development is because the treasurer is really hoping to do more with affordable housing, more with renewable technologies, transportation, and things like that. And so this is our proposal at this point.
Senator Sarati.
Is there a low-income representative on the advisory council presently, like a CAP agency or anything like that?
There is not currently. We do have, VHFA, but we do not have a CAP agency or anything like that. We have loaned previously to entities like the Vermont Community Loan Fund, NeighborWorks of Western Vermont, and the Champlain Housing Trust.
My understanding, can we, is this advisory council in the bill right now? They're going to add to it, right?
No, this
We
is,
gotta
the
talk-
treasurer talked to me, I don't know, some time ago.
Yeah.
She's been thinking about this. It might help. This was our 10% for Vermont, and I
Right.
thought it was to help the,
Housing, weatherization.
well, yeah, in projects that couldn't get regular financing. It sounds like if they're able to get better deals from the banks, maybe we want to look at the strictures we put on them, or is it just, this is the treasurer's fiduciary responsibility? Because this is straight tax revenue. This
Yes.
isn't paper that Vita buys and loans back out.
Yeah.
These are tax dollars.
My recollection is that this fund is pretty valuable and it's underutilized.
Yeah,
And that's the
I
question.
just, well, yeah, well, I wonder, in addition to bankers, if we had somebody who was an advocate, say, hey, we can use these funds, maybe that will
Yeah.
spur some.
I think maybe we'll ask, I don't know, Ashland, if it's you or the treasurer or somebody, to come in and tell us, is the issue just that projects aren't getting presented, or is the issue that because of the fiduciary restrictions, we aren't being able to achieve the goals that we had hoped to? So I think, yeah, this bill isn't going out of here today, so we'll send, an invite back and see if you guys can come talk to us a little bit about what's really going on here. Is it just the advisory council? I'm pretty sure if we put a banker on, we're gonna be pressured to put the credit unions on, which is probably why there are two. But maybe rather than ACCD, we might wanna do a CAP agency or, something like that. Okay.
Sure, absolutely. And I think if, the committee wants to explore more the fiduciary restraints that the treasurer's office has, that would definitely be a conversation for the treasurer herself to be involved.
I think that's, I think we're just trying to figure out what is the root cause. It isn't usually an advisory committee unless they have veto power. Or is it just the real or perceived, what is fiduciary responsibility? And are those requirements too strict to achieve the goal that we wanted, which I believe was higher risk local? I think I remember the image of a goat farmer who needed an expansion. Now, you're nodding, Senator, so I don't think that was my imagination.
well, I
It's
mean,
something
I
like
agree.
that.
It was, what I recall is, as you described, this is sort of outside of what you could get at a bank.
Right.
So if people say, well, I could get a better deal at the bank, then something's amiss, because then they should get a better deal at the bank, obviously.
Yeah.
But the people that wouldn't qualify for whatever reason at the bank, if they're not risky, we should, that's my memory of it. I wasn't sitting in this room when it became enacted, but.
That, and I know this was one of Senator Polina's
Big time, yeah.
pushes,
Yeah.
big time. And this was also done in the context of the state bank
That's right.
and an access to capital study that was done.
Sure.
So I just want to make sure we haven't set things up at cross purposes where
Yeah.
we've got you under certain stringent rules, and at the same time, you need to not follow those rules if you're gonna do the goals we set, so.
Absolutely. I think that discussion would be helpful. And the other thing to remember is that, the past couple of years have been a really unique interest rate environment where financing has been able to be obtained at an all-time low, and that's changing rapidly. And so whether or not changes are needed to deploy financing in this changing interest rate environment, it's something I don't necessarily have the expertise to make the call on, but the treasurer would have much more of.
Yeah, I think that's what we'll do. You're right. I mean, we aren't seeing 1% mortgages anymore.
Right.
Nothing
So
down.
I will brief her on what we talked about, and I will look for Faith's invitation to have her again.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. Are there any other questions on the Children's Trust Fund while I'm here, or are you all set with me for the day?
I think we're set. I'm not seeing any questions. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next, Christine Holquist. Welcome, Christine.
Thank you.
There
Can
you
you all
go.
hear me okay?
We're hearing, you're bouncing around. We're hearing you, but not seeing you.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll turn my video on.
I've been seeing you.
There.
There we go.
So anyway, thank you
All
for,
right. I thought you
thank
were
you for-
somewhere with it. Yep. And you also
you for-
wrote a request, right?
yes, and thank you for giving us this opportunity. We're looking for a small change in Act 71, and I've got Stan Maisel here. He's our staff attorney who will describe it. But in a nutshell, there's a problem in Act 71 that it's a be problematic for the CUDs, because in Act 71 it talks about reverting the assets to the state in the unlikely event of failure of a CUD. But the issue will be, we're trying to go to the bond market and trying to get bank financing for the remaining 40% of what is needed to build these networks. And that would create a problem. So we've made some recommended changes, and I'll turn it over to Stan to describe those changes.
Okay.
Go ahead, Stan.
Hi, good afternoon.
Afternoon.
This is just a technical amendment to one provision in Act 71, which deals with the construction grant program, whereas the VCBB is tasked with distributing, the funds to CUDs and to grantees. And in the unlikely event that a grantee does not comply with grant terms, Act 71 currently reads that the board shall establish standards for recouping grant funds and transferring ownership of grant-funded network assets to the state. And as Christine mentioned, we learned that would cause some issues with obtaining bond funding, being able to access the bond market. And creditors want assurance.
The bond market would like to have access to the assets if they defaulted on their bonds.
Exactly right. Exactly. They want assurances that they can obtain the CUD's assets. So we worked with the CUDs and their counsel and with folks that work in the bond market to craft a small change that would propose that assets be transferred to a court-appointed receiver instead of the state, as a way of protecting the assets. And in that way, the assets could be protected and remain subject to bondholders or creditors' liens if applicable. So it would be just a small change to paragraph 8086C in the statute, which would read, establish standards for recouping grant funds and transferring ownership of grant funded network assets with this new language, which shall remain subject to any outstanding bondholders or creditors' liens, if applicable, to a court-appointed receiver, instead of where it used to say the state. And then the rest of the provision would remain the same.
Have you sent us that language?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, you haven't sent it yet.
Yeah, I believe I sent it
Okay,
earlier.
Yeah,
if you send it,
send it.
I need another screen to see it, so.
Fair enough.
And I've got 2 or 3 going here now, so if you, just at some point with legal language, you don't want us playing with it, so make sure we have it. Senator Pierce has a question.
Yeah, this is an interesting one. I sit here as somebody who, as a resident of Burlington, invested public dollars into Burlington Telecom only to watch it be privatized. So it's not trivial what we're talking about. I think as we laid it out, we were contemplating tens of millions, hundreds of millions of taxpayer dollars going to build out our telecom infrastructure. And we have some experience in the state of mostly federal taxpayer dollars going towards some of these kinds of projects and not really materializing in the way that the promise was. So this is a section of statute that's designed to protect the public from sort of having these assets just sort of vanish in terms of who owns them at the end. So I hear what you're saying about the bond market and those needs, but I'd like us to find a solution that ultimately does not leave the public vulnerable to just having lost this resource. And I guess, I don't know if you have a comment, maybe we can keep thinking it through. But there has to be some way for the public to not lose what the public has invested in. That would be my goal anyway.
Yeah, I would say the answer to that is to fully fund the network. The problem we have, the challenge we have here is we've stated that this is I've been giving the message to the legislature for quite some time, a consistent message that we need to get that, 345 million it would be enough to get a network that's about 550 million in cost funded, because we could go to the market for the remaining 40%, that we need to get to 6% equity levels. If we didn't have to go to the bond or the loan market, then of course it would be straightforward. We could just say, yeah, we own that entire network. The issue really becomes, there's twofold issues here. One is we can't let these networks fail, which is why, putting these into receivership is standard. But at the same time, the only way to make this whole would be to pay off the creditors from the state funds at the time. Now we're talking, what we believe is an unlikely event. However, it's pretty clear that we're not going to achieve our goals if this entirely turns back to the state, because we have private investment that's going into these networks.
Which we've got, I think, 2 issues. One is we get the networks up and running, and then they get sold out to Comcast or somebody. They get sold and they're privatized. But I think maybe CUDs are animals with different spots. They aren't completely publicly funded. Do
Right.
that.
Yeah, Stan, are we protected? I think we all have the same intent, which is that these be community-owned networks and they don't get sold. That's one. Let's package that up as one problem statement. In other words, if a network is up and operating and it's financially performing fine, we don't want. I don't think any of us wants that sold. It's really what we're talking about is the unlikely event of failure. Stan, do you have any? Are there other protections in Act 71? I know I'm putting you on the spot here that protect the network from being sold while operating.
Well, as far as I know, all the CUDs are planning to have public networks, so that I don't believe they can be sold without consent of the board, the VCBB itself.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And we certainly can add that to our grant agreements.
So I'm just a little confused because last year when we did this bill, we did hear you and say, the plan is to use as much grant funding upfront as possible, and then eventually would need to go to the bond market. And this language was in the bill most of the way along the path, I believe. So what has changed that now you're coming back to us asking for this language to be?
Well, frankly, I'm not sure. I'm smarter than I was last year. I'm not a finance expert. It certainly did not pick up on the fact that this would be a problem. But as soon as it was pointed out, it was clear. It's one of the things that kind of slap yourself in the head. But I definitely would never sell myself as a finance expert.
This was an issue.
Go ahead. Sorry.
This was an issue that the CUDs raised because they had been having discussions with potential, firms that were going to provide financing for them, and it became an issue then to them.
But are you going to the bond market earlier than you thought you were going to have to?
Oh, thank you, Ruth.
Reconcile what you said, Christine.
Yeah, thank you. That's Ruth. Thanks for that. That was a little bit of the bailout of my ignorance.
That's okay.
Yeah, because actually that is what happened. We actually found out we can go to the bond market. So I think that we were under the understanding last year that it would be 3 years before we went to the bond market. We're finding we can go to the bond market earlier. We actually have one of the CUDs who is actually speaking to bondholders now. I suppose we would have discovered this 3 years out when we went to the bondholders, but we discovered this because we went to the bond market early.
Okay. And I mean, to Senator Pearson's point, I agree. I think we're trying to find, it would be nice to find the balance between enabling the CUDs to go to the bond market and do what they need to do to get their financing, but also protect public assets. So is there a way you could come up with sort of middle ground? I don't know exactly what it would be, but that we wouldn't be in a position where the assets of a CUD that has run into rocky waters just goes to these bonding agencies and the community is screwed.
Well, I think there is an alternative. I'm speaking on the fly here, so Stan, you can tell me if I'm off too far. But I do think that first of all, it can't be sold without the approval of the VCBB. But we could also say, it can't be sold without approval of the legislature as well.
That was what I was thinking.
Yeah, or even before it.
Well, there are two issues. I think there's the issue of the sale of a CUD, and then there's the issue of a default of a CUD on the bonds. And so,
yeah, that's what I'm referring to. I'm not talking about sale.
I think you're right. We put some stronger language in about sale of CUDs, that's for sure. But with the other issue about defaulting on the bonds and then potentially losing the assets because bonds have been defaulted on, is there a way to come up with language there that would better protect the public assets while also giving the bond market some sort of feeling of security in their investment?
Yeah, go ahead, Stan.
I was just going to say, as I understand it, the bond market is very concerned about having the receivership language in the act, and I know that at least one of the CUDs cannot move forward with financing unless there is a provision that allows such language.
Yeah, that's EC Fiber, correct? EC Fiber's in that position, yeah. So, yeah.
Stan, when it goes into a court-approved receivership, doesn't it then fall to the receiver and the court to disperse?
That's exactly right. The receiver would be court appointed by a Vermont court, and then the receiver would decide where the assets need to be distributed.
The state would have a voice in there along with the bond.
That is correct.
What if we made the board some kind of default receiver or something like that? I mean, there just has to be a way where we can accomplish your goals and better protect taxpayers. I really, you know, there just has to be a way. I mean, we do it by the state has good credit, right? When we back, we have not, what the moral obligation for VEDA, you know, that's not what we're talking about here, but there has to be some tilt in that direction that would allow you to accomplish what you want without us being anywhere close to the situation of fast forwarding 10 years and having to explain to Vermonters why hundreds of millions of dollars have gone out the door and we're still not providing internet, and actually Comcast is now building it out over our infrastructure. I'm not at all comfortable dropping that goal, but I am eager to find a solution that suits your needs. So I would just ask that you brainstorm and try to come up with some way that gives some protection, maintains some protection for taxpayers.
And I think it might be helpful. I don't think we've got any argument that we understand that if the bond market is loaning millions of dollars, they have a fiduciary responsibility to protect that investment. And if the loan is defaulted on, they need to know they're going to be the prime lien holder on the assets. There is another level at which I think it's the intent, you know, we granted money with the intent that this would remain a publicly owned entity of some sort. And I think, I mean, we slogged through a whole lot in a short time, and it may behoove us to sit down for a few minutes and talk or think through what we really want to have happen, and then return to have that discussion, because I think we're just starting to focus on what will that look like, and then we can go from there. So I think that might be helpful. I think you're going to get what the bondholders need. I think we're just trying to figure out what we need, or if what we need is really possible. But I think the ball is back in our court at this point. And if you have any brainstorms that might bail us out, that would be great.
Yeah, and I will point out that Act 71 does allow us to fund private networks. You know, Act 71 has a clause in there that, yeah, so it's, I'm not sure, what was the thinking in the legislature in that as well, but certainly if a private provider develops a universal service plan for a town that's not part of a CUD, where we can provide grant funding to them as well.
And we
So,
slug that out into many late evenings, so.
yeah, I'm sure
I
you
think,
did.
yeah, I mean, there's always something on a bill of this magnitude that comes back that isn't completely worked out in fine detail. So I think we will set up time to have that discussion. This is.
Yeah, well, let me just also say that.
So we've got some
Let me
time.
just also say, if this is the only thing we're talking about on Act 71, you did a pretty darn good job, so.
I'm comfortable with this.
Thank you, Christy.
Okay, but wait till the next bunch of federal money comes in. Then it might get a little more heated. Okay, so,
We'll see what we can come up with.
yeah, okay, you can bail us
Back to you.
out, or, anyone, we're here to go.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I am back.
There must be some parallels to affordable housing. Where, because a lot of public dollars go in there and then people get loans on top of that. I mean, they're just, I admit it, I am traumatized by Burlington Telecom. It's millions and millions of dollars and just Canada. Yeah, some Canadian company owns it. By the way, the service is great. I haven't raised the prices. I grant them that. But that is a travesty of public, policy. It's just a total failure and a very short-term view on it. And so, if we can find some way to.
And this is such a changing landscape that, this is the worst thing that's coming back.
Yeah.
But it's time to rethink it. And in 20 years, 10 years, 5 years, I don't know what's gonna, and they'll probably rethink it again, but I think we need to just take some time on it. The next one I have, and I don't see them on the screen, is Eric Fitzpatrick and Rebecca Samarov. Rebecca's here.
Senator Cummings,
Yes.
Eric and Mike O'Grady cannot come early, so we can't start that section until 3 o'clock.
Until 3 o'clock, all right. And Christopher Herrick isn't here either. So I think we are on break for half an hour.
Oh, my goodness.
We'll
have to start a CUD in it.
Yeah, let's start, all right. We will be back here at 5 minutes of 3. And then we will go through life estates. This didn't take us as long as we thought it might. And there isn't anyone else on the agenda, so. Okay,